Welcome to Becoming Parents podcast. I'm Jen Taylor, your host. I am mom of 18, and you can find me on momsrunningit.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive right in.
Welcome to Becoming Parents. Today, I have with me Dr. Robert Saul. Bob, how are you today?
I'm great. Hope you are.
I'm awesome. I have allergies, but other than that, I am amazing. Thanks so much for being on here. I know you're East Coast time and I'm West Coast time, so it's your almost lunch, but I appreciate you being here. And I'd love for you to just jump in. There's so much information we're going to talk about today.
Well, thank you. Let me just give you a little bit of a capsule of how I became a pediatrician.
Yes.
When I got into my first wife and I were foster parents for children with developmental disabilities. My first foster child had congenital rilla, so visual impairment, hearing impairment, and congenital heart disease. We did that for about 12 to 18 months until we realized it was just more than we could handle. We did a series of children. And unfortunately, it was just more than the two of us could handle since I was in college and then medical school. But that sort of set the stage for becoming a pediatrician, seeing what families went through, seeing the trials and tribulations that families go through, even though I did not have my own children. So when I was in medical school, I wanted to do everything. I wanted to be a dermatologist, radiologist, you name it. I wanted to be not a gynecologist, but everything else just about.
Mm-hmm.
But when it finally came down to choosing something, it was pediatrics, and that's what got me going. And I was very excited to start that in the mid 1970s. I became a parent in 1978.
Oh, yay. Okay. You know, it's funny. I have a friend going through testing now for and she has to decide in her residency what direction, and she decided she didn't want to do pediatrics because she felt like you had to relearn all the dosing for medications and what medications. So I think the more I learn about pediatrics, the more respect I have for pediatricians, because it's a long haul to get there. So I'm going to brag on you just a little bit. That's really amazing. Thank you.
Well, I think my bias is it's the most important specialty there is, because children are our future, and children and pardon my bias here, but the children are undervalued in our society. We spend the majority of healthcare dollars on people like me, when we should be investing a lot more in our children and their future. So that's, even though I've retired now clinically, that's where I'm at in terms of advocating for children, advocating for parents, trying to build better communities and trying to work on parenting as an exercise in raising good children to be good citizens.
Yeah. And then you became a parent after you were already a pediatrician. So jump into that. Did that change things for you?
Well, I was in the midst of residency when I became a parent. And that was an interesting story because the night before I became a parent, I was up all night with another child that died from leukemia. Oh. So literally understanding the trials and tribulations that people go through. So I went through this incredible low to this incredible high within a period of 24 hours. But it taught me some valuable lessons. It taught me a lot. I mean, in my early years, when I got out into private practice, I now had a 1-year-old. And when I was a resident, people would ask me questions. I would give them answers. I read books. I was told. I knew what to do. And it wasn't until I became a parent that I realized what those questions actually were based in, that parents had, and how nuanced the answers had to be. And let me jump forward for just a second, because what I've learned over 40 years is when I first got into practice, parents asked me a question, I told them the answer. What I learned over 40 years is my job as a pediatrician is not to tell people, but to help enable them, to help empower them to be the best parent they could be. That is to look behind the curtain gently with them, see their resources, and see how I can help them become the best parent they can be, not to tell them they need to do this or that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one when you have so much information. And I think parents will use a pediatrician, understandably. You're seeing my child. I have all these questions that are like peripheral maybe to their health, but there's no other person, there's no other profession to ask questions to. I feel like it's possible for pediatricians to be like the go-to to ask all these questions, and you need to kind of have all these resources at your disposal to be able to help them, especially like I did foster care for 15 years also, especially when there are extenuating circumstances that are not normal, that are unusual, and parents might be feeling a little overwhelmed. So I love that you said that empowering parents is really, really important, really important. And we're also different, if you breastfeed or not, how long you do, just that little thing is so different. Now you also became a geneticist. Was that later?
Well, when I finished residency, I then did a fellowship in medical genetics, but I also practiced pediatrics at the same time. The reason I wanted to do medical genetics, and it was just basically it was just the start of the field back then in 1979, is that I was very intrigued, especially with having taken care of children with developmental disabilities and intellectual disability. Why? What causes that? How can I be helpful in terms of making the diagnosis? How can I help those families on their journey that goes beyond just routine pediatric care? So I got, plus, to be honest, I just didn't want to do general pediatrics every day of the week. I wanted some variety in my practice.
I understand that. I still am proud of you, and you're an overachiever. And I think that's amazing, though. Now, you retired after 44 years?
Correct.
Which is amazing. And then you're still involved. So why are you so involved still? And how are you? I know that there's a lot more about community and conscious parenting that I want to go into, but jump in and talk to me about what that transition retiring looked like and what it's like to be a grandparent compared to a parent.
Well, first off, I retired at the end of 2020. I worked as a pediatrician, geneticist for 34 years, and then transferred jobs late in my career to be medical director of general pediatrics at a children's hospital. And then at the very end of my career, as I was running out of gas and as an administrator, I worked in a clinic for children with special healthcare needs, which was perfect for me because it brought my pediatric skills and my medical genetic skills together in a place where I could really be of great benefit to folks. Did that for several years and then retired. Now, fortunately for me, it was at the end of 2020. I endured, 9 months of COVID, and then I could retire clinically. But, and because we'll get into that, I found after almost 30 years, I've been on this journey to find out about what it really means to be a parent, what it really means to get involved in your community, what it really means to advocate for children, to advocate for parents, and how each of us could help improve our communities. So that's why I'm still involved. I write a weekly blog. I have a pediatric advice column. I have, I'm working on my 5th book. So I'm now a consultant at a children's home here in my local community that takes care of children and families in crisis, trying to figure out how we can do enhanced trauma-informed care. So my wife says I'm much, much busier, but it's much more satisfying.
I think that's true to a lot of people that retire, and also great. It's great that you're still busy, as long as it's not too much. I think that keeps you sharp as long as absolutely possible. Jump into your kids are grown now and you have grandkids, and you made that shift after you retired. When did the book start happening in your career?
Actually, the genesis of the book goes back to 1993. So 14 years into my practice. I've been in practice 14 years, and I felt like, I'm not paying back to the community like I should. I need to be more involved in the community. So at the same time, I heard a speaker talk about what hospital systems should be doing in their community. And he said for each hospital system, they need to recognize for everything that happens in the community, I am the problem, I am the solution, I am the resource. So it took me, to be honest, it took me about 2 to 3 months to internalize that message. But I realized that for anything that was happening in my community, I needed to recognize that I am part of that problem.
Yep.
I need to be part of the solution. And to do that, I need to devote my resources to it. So I went to the folks in the community, said, put me in, coach. I'm ready to be good, get a lot of good stuff, really help. And I was involved. And then April 20, 1999, 2 students walk into a high school in Littleton, Colorado, massacre 13 people and kill themselves. You and I know that as Columbine. Mm-hmm. That was a particularly devastating moment for me. You know, I lived in Colorado, but that wasn't because of Colorado. It was just that happened. And I asked myself 2 questions. Could that happen in my community? Yes. What have I done to make a difference? And I honestly said, not enough. Mm-hmm. So when I started writing a series of articles, what I called the 5 steps to community improvement, over 12 to 13 years, wrote over 160 articles for the local newspaper, and turned that into a book in 1993.
Awesome.
Excuse me, in 2013. So that was a 20-year journey.
Yep. Wow, that's really incredible. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So you were doing this work at the same time, maybe not with the thought that it was going to be a book initially, but you were putting in the time and doing all the work as you were working in pediatrics. So, wow, that's incredible. Yeah, we've had other situations like that and they don't get easier. That's amazing.
The day I put the first book to bed, and then it was published 3 months later, was the Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was devastated. But it's interesting, as I was writing these articles and sending them to the paper, I'd oftentimes share them with my wife. And would say, "Oh, I don't know about this one. That sounds a little preachy to me. I don't think I'd send that one in." I said, "You don't understand who I'm preaching to." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "This is to myself. Oh. These are actions. These are action steps for me. And if they make a difference to one person out there, and one family, then so be it. That's great. But this is, writing those 160 articles for the local newspaper now has given me a world of information, and it's helped me on my journey to be a better person, to be a better citizen."
Yeah, I get that. Talk to me about, first of all, I don't feel like parenting is innate. I think some things are, and different things for different people, but I feel like when we go into parenting children, we have this idea, we see the families in the restaurant, like, oh, I'm never going to allow my children to do that, and I'm going to do better at that, and oh no, that's never going to happen. And then we become parents and we realize it's so much harder than we thought, so much more consuming. And I know for me as a parent, it took me a while to realize, like, I'm still creating my own story while I'm creating the stories of my kids' lives too. And like, you don't stop being a friend and a wife and, a sister and someone who works. You don't stop any of that stuff. You just add parenting on, but it's sort of consumed. So I don't know. You talk about, is parenting innate, and what is conscious parenting?
Let me give you a little bit of background to how I got to the conscious parenting and to recognize that parenting is not innate, although that was obvious in my own parenting career, but helping thousands of people as a pediatrician. But as I wrote back in 1999, when I wrote my first article, I came up with 5 steps to community improvement. Okay. Those are very much a part of where I got to in terms of conscious parenting. Number 1, learn to be the best parent you could be. Now, I chose those words very carefully. Parenting is a lifelong learning experience. Best, not everyone has the same circumstances. Not everyone has the same socioeconomic status. Not everyone has the same parenting family status. Not everyone has the same intellectual status. So our job as a society to help them be the best parent they could be. Right. Step number 2, get involved. It's very important for parents and to get involved in their community in some way, shape, or form. Number 3, stay involved. And that might sound the same, but I think it's very different. It's tough to sometimes stay involved in a variety of community activities. Number 4 is probably the most intuitive, but sometimes the most difficult in today's society. Love for others. In our very divisive society where we're yelling and back and forth at each other. But number 5 is the toughest, and I think is an integral part of parenting. And it's been a real journey for me, learning forgiveness. Forgiveness is an essential quality of parenting. And that's sort of become, but that wasn't obvious to me when I first wrote this back in 1999, but it has become obvious to me now over the ensuing 20 plus years, how vital parenting is to that. So as I wrote all those articles, put them in the book, wrote my first book, My Children's Children, Raising Young Citizens in the Age of Columbine.
Yeah, right.
I then was now on this journey, and that was published in 2013. Wrote a children's book to accompany that, and then got very much involved with learning early brain and child developmental science, and co-wrote a book with another pediatrician. And then I changed jobs. And when I changed jobs, I now was the director of director of pediatrics at this hospital, as I mentioned. They made me take a conscious leadership course. And I rolled my eyes and said, do I need to take another leadership course? I did because I had to. Yes, but guess what? I learned a lot. And to simplify, one of the concepts that the teacher talked about is there's a line. And when you're above the line, you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn. When you're below the line, you're closed, you're defensive, you're always right. And so that line in terms of conscious leadership, whether you're conscious of, the whole point is trying to be conscious of where you are. If you're above the line, you're conscious that I'm listening, I'm paying attention. Hopefully, if you're below the line, you're still conscious of that and can make changes. Well, to me, that line was very much applicable for parenting. And I call it the parental awareness threshold. When you're above the parental awareness threshold, you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn, you're ready to be engaged, you're ready to listen and look at your child, put your phone up. When you're below the line, you're closed, you're defensive because I said so, because I'm the parent. And sometimes those are appropriate, though not very often. But hopefully the point of being conscious about where you are as a parent in this relationship, but conscious of where your child is developmentally is the whole point of, to my mind, of what conscious parenting is. And so trying to be aware of where you are so you can make a difference. Because when you make that, when you're, how often are we confronted with behavioral situations from children?
A lot.
Every day, hourly, maybe.
Yeah.
So the whole point is to be conscious about where you are, is to take that pause, to assess, and then choose, hopefully, the best response possible. If you chose the correct response, great. If you chose an inappropriate response in retrospect, then just consciously change your tone. See what you can do better next time.
What does it mean to raise children to be good citizens? And what do parents need to do to develop or improve their parenting skills? You're saying listening and not reacting and being learning. Is there anything else specifically that goes along with that conscious parenting?
Forgiveness.
Yeah, that's the biggest one. I think that's great.
I mean, and I think back to, if you haven't read it, there's a great book, or your listeners, by Mitch Albom called Tuesdays with Morrie. It's about Morrie Schwartz, who was a professor at Brandeis University, dying from ALS, and got together with his pupil before he died. And to simplify, Morrie talked in terms of forgiveness. Morrie talked about forgive yourself, forgive others, and do it now. And so those are, I mean, there are lots of other steps along the way, but those are, and I have been learning this myself. I mean, forgiveness is this lifelong journey. I mean, when your 4-year-old whacks your 2-year-old and you tell the 4-year-old, tell Jimmy you're sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, I guess he was asking for forgiveness, but we know there was no level of sophistication there.
Right.
14-year-old, 24, 44, 84. We've hopefully learned along the way how important forgiveness is and about how we can move forward in time. So I think, so to me, one of the things as a parent, we always talk about, we want our children to be happy. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach to this. I think we want our children to be good citizens, and happiness is a blissful secondary side effect. We've raised our children to be kind, to care for others, to care about others, happiness will come. If we're just looking for happiness, then we end up with a lot of the folks that are then just looking for internal self-satisfaction instead of helping others, exercising empathy.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. Also, I think happiness is so obscure. How there's no barometer for happiness. It means something different for everyone. I don't even know how you would feel like you hit that goal. And then when somebody has a bad day, your kids included, does that mean you did a terrible job because they're not happy that day? And so I'm very, very glad that you brought that up. I think that's super important.
Kids are happy when they get that new bike. When it's a teenager, you got the keys to the car, you were happy. But that's not, to me, happiness is sharing that with others in an empathetic way. Excuse me.
I agree. You also talk about how parenting is a journey. I'd love to hear it from your perspective, because I am imagining you as a parent and a pediatrician, shifting gears a lot as you learn stuff, and then how different it is since your first child was born to now having grandkids.
Well, I have 2 children that are separated by 12 years, so I call them my 2 only children.
Yep, they are.
But now that they're grown, they're good buddies. In their youth, they were 2 only children. What have I learned? I've learned that my reactions and my talk are so important. An example: when my youngest was, say, 7 or 8, one night, he said something that I thought was really wrong, and it set me off, and I yelled at him. Well, my wife got mad at me for yelling at him, and we went into that family meltdown mode. I'm sure it's never happened at your house, where nobody talks. Everyone just walks past each other for several hours.
Yeah.
And then it was time for him to go to bed, and one of us always laid down with him. And I said, "Son, I'm so sorry. I think you did something wrong, but Dad's response was totally inappropriate, and I'm asking for your apology. I want you to forgive me." And he said, "Dad, would you be quiet?" I said, "Why?" He said, "I hate it when you're nice." So I, and I don't say that to applaud myself. I say that even back then, I think I was on this conscious parenting journey, recognizing that I need to analyze what I do in the moment and analyze what I have done. And so this pause, assess, and choose paradigm that I have, that I think is so important. It's not unique. It should happen in all of our interactions with folks. But we got to pause, not knee-jerk reaction. We got to assess what's happening and then choose a response. But again, if that didn't solve things, hours later, or days later, even weeks later, we could reassess and what may be a better response. I mean, because if you ended up yelling at your child and saying something you totally regret, hopefully as a parent, you can learn that forgiveness is so important, and ask for forgiveness.
And parenting, it changes so much, when from the newborn to the toddlers to then I call the period of grace, and then teenagers happen. And then that I like the interaction, but that odd interaction when our kids are becoming adults, and that like senior year of high school, where they want more independence, but they also want you. And there's a lot of friction sometimes in that. You talk about parenting as a journey. So what are signposts or maps that we can use to discover along the way? Because I think we're changing, our story's changing, who we are, how we're developing, including in our parenting, but our kids are also changing dynamically day to day.
Yeah, and in my book, Conscious Parenting, I actually talk about interactions for the 1 to 2 year old,
Okay.
2 to 5 year old, 5 to 10 year old, and 10 to 20 year old, because I think those, as you said, those are unique periods, and it's so important that we understand. One, that we need to understand those periods. We need to understand that the expectation we have of a 5-year-old is very different than the 10-year-old and very different than the 15-year-old.
Yep.
But we also need to understand what they're going through. Like you said, the 15 to 20-year-old is going through those teen years, that period of trying to understand independence, trying to become more an individual. But one of the most important things we need to remember is the adolescent brain doesn't really develop until age 25.
Yeah.
So we sort of think, as soon as they get out of high school and go away to school or to the military or job or on their own, that they're adults. Not really. And so we need to be very cognizant of that and sort of understand those. And so, how often have we as parents and with your teens said, I told you that. We're not going to do that. Well, if their brain's not developed, that will continue to be a pattern. We can't get overtly frustrated. We can be internally frustrated, but we need to try to be calm and say, we've gone over this before. And I understand you sort of think you can still test me on this. My resolve is not going to change.
Right.
You still need to be a good driver. You still need to, we're still going to do this. We're not going to get into a shouting match about this. And if you don't understand it now, you'll understand it later, but we're going to continue to be calm and discuss this as we can going forward. That's really hard.
How much have your kids taken all of this to heart with their parenting?
Well, it's interesting you ask, because we were just visited my youngest, and he has an 11-year-old stepdaughter, and he is a fantastic father. And one of the joys of parenting, and we talk about the joys of grandparenting. To me, as I saw this weekend, one of the real joys of parenting is seeing your own children become parents, and they go, wow. I mean, I get teary just thinking about that. And so, I think he did. We went through some turbulent times with him, and it was difficult. My oldest son, we had some very turbulent times, but now he is the parent of our 2-year-old granddaughter, and it's just delightful to see what a good father he is, and how calm and understanding and comforting and doing all the things. I don't think he learned them from me, though I'd like to think he did. But he has just adopted the correct way of doing things.
I love that. I have grandkids also, and I remember my daughter saying, I'm going to do a much better job parenting than you're doing, when she was in angst. And I said, I hope so. I mean, I had this goal to be a great parent, and I loved it, but you make mistakes. There's no handbook. And then that daughter became a mom, and she talks to me differently about it now than she used to. But I still want them to be, yes, take everything you learned that was good and not good, and how you want to do things, and one up me. I would love you to one up me in parenting. That would be amazing. But it is really, it's fun seeing them and going through the same struggles and that we did when we were parenting. So,
one of the questions I always loved asking young mothers as they were coming in for their well child visits between 0 and 2, I said, "Now, do you appreciate your mother more?"
Yeah, right.
Almost universally, it's yes. I mean, though obviously, some of the families did not have the parenting models that we would like, for unfortunate reasons. But by and large, they realize what a gift it is, what a responsibility it is, and what a tough job it is.
Yeah, Bob, thank you so much for being on today. I appreciate you so much. All the links for your books are in the show notes. People can find you, reach out to you to be a guest or speaker. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here today. I've really enjoyed it.